She walked into the luxury spa wearing nothing more than a simple sundress and a warm smile. No makeup, no designer bag, no flashy jewelry. To the staff, she looked like someone who didn't belong there. Definitely not the type of woman their exclusive clients were used to seeing. Whispers began to spread the moment she stepped through the marble doors. Within minutes, she was approached by a receptionist with a forced smile and a cold tone. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, "but this spa is for members only." Before she could explain herself, security was already walking her toward the exit. Her heart pounded, not from embarrassment, but from something else. Something they didn't know. Outside, standing quietly by a sleek black car, was her husband. He didn't look like a billionaire either, just a calm, sharply dressed man who watched the scene unfold. And when he walked in to speak with the manager, everything changed. The staff went pale. The manager stuttered. Because what none of them knew was this. The woman they just kicked out didn't just belong there. She owned the entire spa chain. But how did she end up being treated like a stranger in her own empire? And what her husband said next left everyone speechless. As the manager nervously ushered the woman and her husband into his office, it was clear that something had shifted in the air. The staff, still in shock, exchanged glances, whispering about what had just happened. They had no idea who she was. What they had mistaken for a quiet, humble woman was, in fact, a force to be reckoned with. Her name was Clare Dawson, a name that had been quietly growing in power over the past few years. Most people knew her husband, Samuel Dawson, a tech billionaire known for his sharp business moves and low-profile lifestyle. But Clare, despite her wealth, preferred to stay out of the limelight. She had spent years building her own empire, starting with a small wellness center that eventually grew into a multi-million-dollar spa and wellness business. It was never about the money for Clare. It was about creating a space where people could find peace, something she never had in her own life. But somewhere along the way, the world had started to view her as just another quiet, submissive wife to a powerful man, ignoring her achievements. They had no idea how much she had done behind the scenes. As the manager nervously hovered, Samuel stepped forward. "You don't understand, do you? My wife doesn't just invest in spas, she owns this entire operation," he said, his voice calm yet carrying an undeniable authority. The manager, still trying to process the information, blinked in disbelief. I'm sorry, sir, but I thought this was just a membership-only spa. We only cater to exclusive clients." He stammered, eyes flicking nervously between Clare and her husband. "We never meant to offend." Clare raised a hand, cutting him off, but her expression remained calm, almost detached. She wasn't angry. She was something far more dangerous, indifferent. "You didn't offend me," she said quietly, her voice carrying an edge that only Samuel seemed to recognize. "You just underestimated me." The tension in the room thickened as Clare's words hung in the air. For a moment, everyone was silent, the weight of the situation settling in. This wasn't just about a simple mistake anymore. It was about the constant assumption that Clare was nothing more than a decorative piece in her husband's life. A notion that Samuel, despite his affection for her, had often allowed. The spa, the businesses, the empire that Clare had meticulously built, none of it had been taken seriously by the outside world. The staff had no idea about Clare's role in the company. To them, she was always just Mrs. Dawson, a title that had often led to dismissive glances and condescending smiles. They didn't know about the countless sleepless nights she'd spent negotiating deals, nor the passion she had poured into transforming her vision into reality. The world saw her as a shadow of Samuel, and for too long that had suited her. But now it was clear she had had enough. Samuel, noticing Clare's growing frustration, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let's not waste time on apologies," he said, his voice measured yet firm. "You have a decision to make, and I suggest you make it quickly. You either recognize the power and worth of my wife, or you lose more than just your job here." The manager swallowed hard, eyes darting nervously around the room, realizing that the situation had just shifted from a simple misunderstanding to something far more complicated. He could already feel his career hanging by a thread. But even more unsettling was the growing sense of realization that Claire wasn't just a woman with a rich husband. She was a force in her own right, and the spa was just the beginning of her empire. What did this mean for the future of their business? Meanwhile, outside, the whispers among the spa's clientele had already started. Those who had been lounging in the luxurious waiting area were now looking at each other, their curiosity piqued. Some of them recognized Samuel's name immediately, but they were still unsure about the woman who had been kicked out. They knew the rules of the spa, no exceptions for anyone, regardless of wealth or status. But Claire's calm demeanor seemed to speak volumes. Who was she really? As Claire and Samuel stood there, waiting for the manager's next move, Claire felt the familiar sting of frustration. This wasn't just about the spa. It was about every other moment in her life when her worth had been reduced to nothing more than her appearance or her husband's wealth. She'd have fought for everything she had, but people continued to see her as a background character in someone else's story. The manager finally spoke again, his voice trembling. "Please, if there's any way I can make this right." Claire's lips curled into a faint smile. "It's too late for that. You've already made your decision. Now it's time to face the consequences." The air in the office grew heavy with uncertainty, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. Claire's silence was more potent than any words, and the manager was beginning to realize the depth of the mistake he had made. He had thought he was merely enforcing the rules that had never once been challenged in the spa's history. But now, standing before Clare, he understood that there were some rules that should never have been made in the first place. Outside the office, murmurs from the other guests grew louder. Some had overheard the conversation and began speculating. Had the woman been kicked out because she was a troublemaker? Or perhaps because she was trying to get special treatment? No one knew for sure, but all eyes were on the situation, waiting for it to unfold. The exclusivity of the spa was at stake, and with it, the reputation of its management. But Claire wasn't concerned with the spa's reputation. She didn't care about the gossip or the judgment. What bothered her was the humiliation of being dismissed, of being treated as less than she was, and she had been patient for too long. Samuel, noticing the growing crowd, stepped forward once again, his calm demeanor faltering slightly. "You've misjudged my wife, and it's going to cost you," he said, his voice low but cutting. "You're not dealing with just a billionaire's wife. You're dealing with someone who made herself. Now, you need to decide how much you're willing to risk for your precious image." The manager's face went pale. He had heard rumors about Claire's quiet involvement in the business world, but this was something else entirely. His mind raced, trying to figure out what exactly had gone wrong. Was this an elaborate test? Was Claire trying to prove a point? Or was this the beginning of something bigger, something he didn't fully understand? Claire leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "I've been underestimated my entire life," she said, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "But today, I'm done being invisible. Today, you'll see exactly who I am." The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire world had paused, waiting for Claire's next move. The manager shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around the room as though looking for a way out. But there was no escape. Claire had all the power now, and she knew it. The guests outside had begun to gather near the windows, watching with curiosity. They didn't know what was happening inside, but they could feel the change in the atmosphere. The calm, quiet woman they had all dismissed was about to make a statement that none of them would forget. Claire took a deep breath, then turned to Samuel. He nodded once, and together they walked out of the office, leaving the manager standing there, unsure of what had just transpired. As they exited the building, the murmurs from the other guests grew louder. The tension was palpable, and Claire could almost feel the weight of every set of eyes on her. But she didn't flinch. This was her moment. What happened next would change everything, both for the spa and for Claire. But would the manager finally see the mistake he'd made? And what would Claire do to make sure no one ever underestimated her again? The pieces were falling into place, and all that was left now was the final confrontation. As Claire and Samuel stepped out into the bright sunlight, the murmurs from the guests grew louder. Every word, every look, felt like a ripple in a pond, spreading outward. Claire's heart raced, but not from nerves. No, it was from the exhilaration of finally stepping into her own power. The spa's doors closed behind them, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the world had stopped spinning. But as they walked toward their car, Claire's phone buzzed in her purse. She didn't need to check it to know that something had changed. There was a sense in the air. Something was off. Her fingers tightened around the phone as she pulled it out, unlocking it with a quick swipe. The message on the screen made her blood run cold. It was from her personal assistant. * emergency meeting scheduled. Board members are on a call, urgent. They're making moves behind your back. *. Her stomach dropped. Claire's mind raced back to her companies, the ones she had spent years building. The ones she had poured everything into, only to have her ownership questioned time and time again. For the first time, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Had someone been planning to take everything from her? Was this the first step in a larger scheme to undermine her? She read the message again, but it didn't make sense. The board members were supposed to be loyal, weren't they? The very people she trusted had been moving behind the scenes, plotting something she didn't yet understand. Had her own empire turned against her? Samuel noticed her growing tension and stopped walking. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp with concern. Claire showed him the message, her eyes narrowing as she processed the implications. Samuel's jaw tightened. This isn't just about the spa anymore, was it? Before Claire could answer, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video call from her biggest competitor, a ruthless entrepreneur who had been trying to buy her out for months. Claire had always brushed him off, but the look in his eyes on the screen told a different story. He wasn't here to negotiate, he was here to take. "You've been warned," he said coldly, his face smirking with confidence. "You can't hide behind your husband's wealth anymore. The board's already turning against you. You've lost control, Claire. It's over." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her empire, her dreams, were slipping through her fingers. What had started as a small misunderstanding in a luxury spa was now spiraling into a full-blown attack on everything she had worked for. Claire's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Who could have orchestrated this? Why now? As she stood there, facing her competitor's smug grin on the screen, she realized that the battle she was fighting wasn't just about respect, it was about survival. And she wasn't going to let anyone take what was hers. Her eyes locked with Samuel's, and the unspoken understanding passed between them. This wasn't over, it had only just begun. The stakes were higher than ever, and the people who thought they could take her down had no idea what they were up against. But Claire had one advantage they didn't: she knew how to play the game. Now, the real fight was about to begin.